What's good, y'all boys? Next up, we're gonna be reacting to the worst ways cartel undercover agents work. Less.
Arana. In 1980, 33-year-old DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena moved with his wife and 3 sons to Guadalajara, Mexico, for a posting at the DEA office there. The city was the heart of the Guadalajara cartel, run by Rafael Caro Quintero and Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, who were shipping tons of marijuana and cocaine into the United States. Camarena's job was undercover narcotics work, blending into bars, ranches, and backrooms, using fluent Spanish and street slang to move through the same spaces as traffickers without standing out. Over the next few years, he and pilot Alfredo Zavala built a clearer picture of the cartel's operations, often flying over remote areas of Zacatecas to log hidden airstrips and guarded compounds. On the ground, Camarena listened as cartel growers bragged about a massive operation protected by authorities. By late 1984, his reports led Mexican...
Bro, I swear, just sit on fucking. Hold on. Alright, we're good now.
Federal police to Rancho Bufalo, a 1,300-acre marijuana plantation. In November 1984, around 450 Mexican soldiers backed by helicopters descended on Rancho Bufalo. They destroyed roughly 4,000 tons of high-grade cannabis and seized more. In total, crops worth an estimated $8 billion, about 1/3 of the U.S. marijuana supply at the time. The bust cost cartel leader Caro Quintero at least $50 million personally, and soon he realized the man responsible, Kiki Camarena. On February 7, 1985, at about 1 p.m., Camarena left the U.S. consulate in Guadalajara to meet his wife for lunch. He was 3 weeks away from a transfer back to San Diego. A corrupt employee inside the consulate helped cartel gunmen identify him as he stepped onto the street. 5 armed men forced him into a car at gunpoint and drove off. Camarena's pilot, Zavala, was seized that same day. Both men were held at a house on Lope de Vega Street, owned by cartel leader Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo. Inside, the men dragged the agents into a room, tied their hands and sat them in chairs. At the same time, cartel bosses and the corrupt head of Guadalajara's secret police circled them, repeating the same questions about raids, informants, and which officials in Mexico were helping the DEA. Every time they thought they were holding back, someone stepped forward with a tire iron and slammed them into their heads and ribs. Then another man pressed a lit object to their skin, burning them while they moaned and struggled to breathe. When they started to drift out, a doctor knelt beside them and pushed stimulants straight into their chests so their hearts would kick hard and drag them back awake, just so the torture could continue. By the time the beating finally stopped, more than 30 hours had passed. Roughly 2 days
30 hours? God damn.
after the kidnapping, Camarena and Zavala were dead. Weeks later, search teams digging on a ranch miles from Guadalajara pulled out 2 plastic-wrapped bundles. The men were blindfolded, bound, gagged, and marked head to toe with the fractures, burns, and crushed bone from the torture they had endured for what he knew as an undercover agent. Barry Seal.
Okay, I heard about this story. Not Barry, but the Kiki Camarena thing. I think when I was in elementary school.
By the early
Could be wrong.
1980s, Adler
Or
Berriman
bro.
Barry Seal was one of the Medellin cartel's main smugglers, flying cocaine from Colombia into the United States and earning tens of millions of dollars as a trusted transport pilot for Pablo Escobar's network. He had started out as a gifted young pilot from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, flying solo as a teenager and later working for Trans World Airlines, but step by step slid from covert work into full-time drug trafficking, eventually moving an estimated 56 tons of cocaine into the country. In 1984, his run collapsed when DEA agents caught him on a single heavily loaded flight carrying about 462 pounds of cocaine, with a street value of roughly $168 million, enough to justify a life sentence under normal circumstances. Facing that reality, Seal chose cooperation over prison and agreed to work undercover for the DEA, continuing to fly for the cartel, but now with hidden cameras and recording equipment on his planes. Agents fitted his aircraft with advanced radio systems, and the CIA later added secret cameras, so that to the Medellin cartel, he still looked like the same smuggler, while in reality he was collecting inside evidence. In 1984, Seal flew a mission to Nicaragua, where the hidden cameras captured Pablo Escobar and other Medellin members loading cocaine onto his plane, alongside Nicaraguan Sandinista officials. Those photographs ended up on President Ronald Reagan's desk and were later shown publicly as proof of a link between traffickers and the Nicaraguan government. For the cartel, that was pure betrayal. Their trusted pilot had turned into a star witness for the DEA and helped embarrass them on the world stage. They put a bounty on his head, $500,000 if he was killed, reportedly up to $1 million if they could take him alive to Colombia. On February 19, 1986, Seal drove into the parking lot of the Salvation Army Center on Airline Highway for a required 6 p.m. check-in for the U.S. Army. About 30 seconds after he parked, a car that had been watching from the lot moved into position, and a Colombian hitman stepped out with a suppressed MAC-10 submachine gun. The gunman fired multiple bursts into Seal's car window, hitting him 6 times, 3 shots to the head and 3 to the chest, killing him almost instantly. Investigators later tied the killers to the Medellin cartel.
How did somebody... Okay, no one would have guessed it, but where are the U.S. officials? He's still at this Salvation Army tent, right? He's on the army base when this happened, right?
About 30 seconds after he parked, a car that had been watching from the lot moved into position, and a Colombian hitman stepped out with a suppressed MAC-10 submachine gun. The gunman fired multiple bursts into Seal's car window, hitting him 6 times, 3 shots to the head and 3 to the chest, killing him almost instantly. Investigators later tied the killers to the Medellin cartel and convicted 3 Colombian assassins, but one question never fully went away. How did they know exactly where and when a DEA informant with a cartel bounty would be sitting in his car, alone and unprotected in a supposedly controlled environment at a U.S. Army facility? The Tláhuac lynching. On the afternoon of November 23, 2004, 3 police officers named Cristobal Bonilla Martin, Edgar Moreno Nolasco, and Victor Mireles Barrera drove an unmarked gray Ford Focus into the Peña Alta neighborhood of San Juan Ixtayopan on the southern edge of Mexico City. They weren't in uniform. They were working undercover near an elementary school, tasked with parking nearby, taking photos and gathering information on dealers who were selling drugs around children. To residents, especially parents who had already heard rumors about child kidnappers targeting the area, the scene looked very different. They saw 3 unknown men in plain clothes sitting in a discreet car near a school and pointing cameras at children. As the men stepped out with cameras, neighbors saw them pointing their lenses toward the school and panicked. People rushed out of their homes and shops, shouting that the child kidnappers had come back. Within minutes, the street was packed with hundreds of residents sprinting toward the 3 officers, who retreated and tried to hide inside their unmarked Ford Focus. The crowd surrounded the car, rocked it violently, smashed the windows, and then dragged the officers out onto the dirt, where they were punched, kicked, and beaten with rocks and wooden boards. Some in the crowd called local TV stations, and news crews arrived to film the scene as the officers, faces swollen and covered in blood, tried to say they were federal police. The mob ignored them and kept pulling them through the streets by their belts and shirts, kicking their ribs and faces until bones gave way. At one spot along the street, attackers doused Cristobal and Edgar in gasoline and set them on fire. Victor was dragged more than a kilometer downhill toward the town kiosk to be burned as well. But a tactical team finally forced its way through the crowd and pulled him out seconds before it happened. He spent about a month in a coma with shattered bones and permanent disfigurement. Guillermo Calderoni. In the late 1980s,
Okay, I don't know if I'm tweaking, but what did that have to do with cartel undercover agents were killed? I ain't gonna.
different. They saw three unknown men in plainclothes who were tasked with parking nearby, taking photos and gathering information on dealers who were selling drugs around children. They saw the as the police.
Fuck the crowd.
The ribs doubt mortality. He's Guillermo Calderoni. In the late 1980s, Guillermo Gonzalez Calderoni was one of the most feared police commanders in Mexico. He worked for the Federal Judicial Police and helped arrest major traffickers, including cartel boss Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, which made him look like a ruthless cartel hunter. But behind the scenes, witnesses later said he was also on cartel payrolls, feeding information to traffickers while officially fighting them. By the early 1990s, political fights inside Mexico and corruption cases closing in around him made his position very risky. In 1993, when a warrant was issued for his arrest in Mexico, Calderoni crossed the border and fled to the United States. There, he contacted DEA agent Hector Barelas, who had previously worked with his men, and offered something the U.S. rarely gets: a top Mexican commander willing to talk about how deep cartel corruption went inside the Mexican government. The DEA brought him in as a protected witness and even allowed him to move millions of dollars into the U.S., a sign of how valuable his information was to them. For roughly 10 days, he sat in safe houses and meeting rooms, giving statements about presidents, cabinet members, and security chiefs who, he claimed, were tied to drug money. On February 5, 2003, Calderoni left a lawyer's office in McAllen, Texas, one of the busiest border towns in the region. In broad daylight, as he walked across the parking lot toward his car, a gunman approached and shot him execution style.
Motherfuckers is bold, man. It's real. I'm digging my nose, by the way. I'm not asleep. You had a bugger, you just couldn't get out. Like, God damn.
Across the parking lot toward his car, a gunman approached and shot him execution style, then escaped before anyone could stop him. Calderoni died there between parked vehicles, even though he was supposed to be under U.S. protection as a high-value informant.
They did nothing.
Reports show
just
no
goes
one...
to show, bro, witness protection program is bullshit. Or protective custody is bullshit. The fact that you can still die under here, aren't you supposed to be protected? Why are you getting killed? It's the dumbest shit in the world, bro. Like, actually the dumbest shit in the world. Just some stupid ass title the U.S. tries to give you, so you feel protected, or some shit.
No one has ever been charged with the murder. El Pollo, Almada. On September 26, 2019, federal police raided a house in Zapopan, Jalisco, and arrested 27-year-old Carlos El Pollo Almada Castrillo, the CJN cartel boss who controlled all operations across Guadalajara, Mexico's second-largest city. Almada was lifelong friends with Ruben Oseguera Gonzalez, known as El Menchito, the son of CJN leader El Mencho. The two had grown up together and stayed close, which meant Almada knew Menchito's routines, security details, money movements, and inner-circle conversations that no outsider could ever access. Menchito had been sitting in a Mexican prison since 2015, fighting extradition to the United States for 3 years, while his lawyers kept winning court battles. U.S. prosecutors desperately needed an insider witness who could testify about CJNG operations to finally force Mexico to hand him over. After his arrest, Almada realized cooperating was his only way out of a lifetime behind bars, so he agreed to talk to American authorities and share everything he knew about Menchito's organization. That testimony gave prosecutors the evidence they needed to pressure Mexico into action. On February 21, 2020, Mexican officials walked into Menchito's cell, handcuffed him, and put him on a plane to Washington, D.C. to face drug trafficking charges in U.S. federal court. Inside the CJNG cartel, leaders quickly suspected Almada had provided the key information that broke the extradition logjam after years of delays. Just 8 days later, on March 5th at around 11 a.m., guards at Puente Grande Maximum Security Prison opened Almada's cell door and found his body hanging from a bedsheet tied to the ceiling grate right next to the toilet. The death certificate said mechanical asphyxia by hanging, but officials never clarified if it was suicide or murder, and they stayed silent about how it happened in one of Mexico's most secure facilities. Mexican intelligence believed El Mencho ordered the hit through operatives already inside the prison, staging it as suicide to send a message to anyone else thinking about cooperating.
Well, WVID, yo boys. Note to self, bro. Don't be a part of these drug organizations. And something else. If you're a DA agent, be careful. I ain't gonna lie, you might get flipped too. No cap, no kizzy. Interesting video, interesting video. Scary as hell, man. Some of these people are monsters, bro. I ain't gonna lie. Alright, boys, I'm catch y'all. Be easy.